ॐ भद्रं मे अपि वातय मनः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. The fifth verse we will chant again because the third line we still have to see. न मृत्युर्न शङ्का न मृत्युर्न शङ्का न मे जातिभेदः पिता नैव मे नैव माता न जन्म न बन्धुर्न मित्रं गुरुर्नैव शिष्यः न बन्धुर्न मित्रं गुरुर्नैव शिष्यः चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम्. Although this verse looks a little drastic and puts one off, can have the tendency to put one off Vedanta completely, because what does it say? It says, I'm not afraid of death, which is a lie. You know, you can't say that with a straight face. And then on the face of it, and then I'm not affected by social hierarchies. One is very much, even as one is saying that, one is wondering if one is looking good saying that, and and then one declares one does not have either mother or father. Not that one is in the sense of an orphan, but one never had a mother or a father. Not that one doesn't have it now, but one never had mother, what father, and then what relative, what friend. Looks like a very lonely life. And then people who have been following this text can say, up till today I was with you. After this, I don't know where this is going to take me, because this looks like a very lonely life, where you keep negating everything, and then what do? Who do you call when you're feeling like you want to talk to somebody? There is nobody, no relatives, no friends, no mother, no father, nothing. And so therefore, this has to be understood properly. And we can see that there is a difference between loneliness and what is called kaivalya in Sanskrit, which means not loneliness, onlyness. Onlyness is not opposed to loneliness. It's not the same as loneliness. Onlyness means cognitively I understand that I am the only significant thing there is, which means I am whole, I am complete. It's not that mother, father has to be disowned, but cognitively there is no dependence on them, on friends, on relatives in the form of crutches. The crutches are slowly let go of. So if there is a leg injury, you go to the hospital, the doctor says you need crutches. You have to be not putting weight on the leg. If you put weight on the leg, it will not heal. You need crutches. Then you come home with the crutches. And you walk everywhere with the crutches. And of course, after a little while of resting the leg and doing whatever the doctor told to do, then you find that it is getting stronger, it is paining less and less. Then what happens? Then from 2 crutches you reduce to 1 crutch. That's what generally people do. In the beginning you need both the crutches, then after that the one leg is getting better, the other leg is also getting better, so you reduce to 1 crutch. Then in the next week what happens? That leg also gets much stronger and much better, and then you can throw away that crutch as well. This is the normal healing journey in the realm of physical healing. But somehow in the realm of mental and emotional healing journey, we have got it wrong. We end up with more crutches than we began with by some strange logic. We don't want to throw away the crutch. We don't think that, okay, I don't need it anymore. This is a wonderful thing that I don't need the crutch anymore. Instead, the jiva bemoans, oh, I have to throw this away, so sad. I won't have this anymore. Yes, you won't have this anymore, but let's look at why you won't have this anymore. You don't need this anymore. That is what is the difference here. So why are mother and father crutch? They are crutches because as a baby, one needs them. One cannot grow up without the primary caregivers. One absolutely cannot grow up without them. One needs the mother, one needs the father. Both one needs to grow up into a healthy person, a happy child, a healthy child, needs both the parents. They are both the crutches. And then as the child grows older, the crutch is not needed as much. The child grows into a young adult, the child grows then into an adolescent, the young adult, and no longer a child. This adult has now a home of their own. First the boy or girl, they go to school, and a young man, young woman go to college, and then after that you don't need the mother, father so much. You are busy, one is busy exploring the journey of oneself, the journey that is the oneself. Oneself means relative to, as a liker, as a disliker. One has one's own set of friends, and this is how the Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, called this the process of individuation, where you come to on your own, this letting go of the mother-father crutch. And many times this process is thwarted because of a dysfunctional relationship between mother and father. Sometimes it is there between the primary caregivers or primary scaregivers, as they might be. So, therefore we have it is a truncated relationship, or it's a relationship based on obligation and certain other pretenses and so many other things. I don't need to go into that, everybody knows. And so the individuation does not fully happen, the dependency is still there. Or maybe there is no dependency on the part of the person, but there is dependency on the other side. And so then, because there is dependency on the other side, it has to be met with constant sense of obligation. Everything makes for a very dysfunctional relationship. And in this kind of a dysfunctional way of relating, whether it's the primary caregivers or anybody else, and in fact the primary caregiver relationship is the building block of all relationships. So even if the mother-father are no longer in the body, the relationship is still in the mind. And that same rubric, the same fears, the same obligations, the same dysfunctionality one brings into all other relationships. This is what generally happens. And so therefore what we do is that we understand this to not to mean that you have to just, let go of the mother, father completely, not like that. We get to the place of enjoying all relationships. My guru, Swami Dayananda ji, wrote one book, Freedom in Relationship, not freedom from relationship. This was the title of the book. Very nice book it is. And so, so in that spirit, it is how to have this moksha while being related to everybody. You don't have to run away to the Himalayas, because there itself is a problem. Wherever you go, there you are. You may have run away from the people, but the people are carried where? Here, in the head. In other words, everybody has two sets of parents, two sets of siblings, two sets of whatever friends and all other relatives. Why two sets? One objective, that which is there in the external world, that which I call mother, father, friend, sibling, sister, brother, whatever it is. And the other one is what? A subjective clone of that same person loaded in the head. This is a very interesting thing. So there is two sets of parents, two sets of everybody that we know. One is the objective person, however they are, whoever they are, and the other one is the subjective version of them loaded in the head. And how are they loaded in the head? Usually in the form of unrequited expectations, unmet expectations. This is how mother should have been. She was not, she is not. This is how father should have been. He was not, he is not. This is how childhood friend should have been. This is how sister should have been. This is how brothers should have been. This is how relatives should have been. So the objective mother-father, they really do not pose any problem. They are who they are, they were who they were, in all their glory, in all their challenges, in all their potential, whatever they had. That's easy to deal with. But what is difficult to deal with has nothing to do with the objective mother and father. It has to do with the subjective version of the people that are sitting in my head, in one's head, in the form of expectations that are unmet expectations. This is exactly what Bhagavan Krishna says in at the end of the 5th chapter, introducing Dhyana Yoga meditation. He says, Parshan Bahyan Bahihi Kritva. One of the pre-meditative, steps. The steps in the meditative process after assuming the proper posture, Sukham Sthiram Asanam and Samam Kaya Shiro Grivam. The head, neck and back are in the single straight line. The eyeballs are not restless. The eyes are softly closed. The eyelids are not flickering. And there is no tension. And the eyes are as though focused towards the tip of the nose. All this after assuming the posture, after asking the meditator to assume the posture, Bhagavan Krishna says what? He says, Sparshan Bahyan Bahihi Kritva. A very beautiful advice. Sparshan Sprishyate iti sparshaha. So sparshan means all the impressions. Keep the external world outside. This seems like a strange advice. What is it that is called the external world? Is it outside or inside? It's already outside. So what do you mean keep the external world external before you start to meditate? This is exactly what is meant. Unload the primal relationships and its authors from the head. Because whatever is sitting in the head is nothing to do with the people that were or are externally. They have somehow crept under the skin. In fact, we have an expression. This person is bugging me, getting under my skin. This is the expression. And so here, whether it's mother, father, or any other primary caregiver has got under the skin and has entered the antahkarana in the form of sneaky expectations. And then that is again completely not in keeping with my Swarupa, as we have been studying, as that limitlessly joyful entity, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am of the nature of Ishvara. I am Shiva, nothing but Shiva. This is completely in opposition to that reality. And so therefore I have to help myself by unloading the stowaway subjective people that I am carrying in my head. And this is not only to be done before meditation, but it can be done all the time. It can be done before meeting somebody. That's very useful. Otherwise, one will be meeting, somebody with certain assumptions already loaded in the head. It's nice to unload and then go into the meeting, go into any kind of an interview, go into any kind of a situation. So how do I unload these people from the head? Very simple. You visualize the person, and then you see that, you just look at them and then see that they have certain likes, dislikes, whoever they are in your perception. You say, I give you the freedom to be who you are. Whoever you were, whoever you are, I give you the freedom to be who you are. But I don't want to give you the freedom. Doesn't matter. Pretend. Fake it and make it. Pretend. Just say, right now, I'm going to give you the freedom to be whoever you are. Oh, but you are very annoying. Okay, I give you the freedom to be as annoying as you want to be. And then you add, in my perception. However you are in my perception, I give you the freedom. What does this do? This takes away the subjectivity. It takes away the subjective mother, father, and all these people loaded in the head. I have repatriated them to the external mother and father, and I have said, I'm not going to worry about these expectations, these unmet expectations, the frozen needs, and all the fears and tears connected to this relationship. Why? Because I'm not buying into this thought right now that I lack this and I need this from you. I just understand that you are incapable of giving this to me. And that's okay. I give you the freedom, I grant you the freedom to have the capacity of not meeting my needs. You see how immediately you feel free? Oh my God, this is wonderful. And why is this objective? For the first time, perhaps, one is seeing that this person is not ready, either unable or incapable or unwilling to meet whatever I think my needs are. This is looking at them objectively. Then I'm no longer a victim. I have many, many, many choices. I can look for other people to meet those needs, or I can interrogate the needs and see where they are coming from, why they are so strong, where I need to go, how I need to grow. All this is there in this verse. All this is there. And this has to be looked at. This is all about cleaning up the relationships, mopping up the difficult, what should I say, the difficult residues in the relationship. And one thinks you need the other person to clean the relationship up. No, all you need is yourself. That's all you need. Because this is really nothing to do with the other person. The other person is however they were, however they are. The problem is with oneself alone. And so, therefore, these kinds of relationships, the subjective relationships, are cleaned up completely in order to even be able to walk on the path of Jnana Yoga. In order to walk on the path of knowledge, to pursue this knowledge seriously, the internal divisions, the duality sitting within, the Kurukshetra, the battlefield within, has to be simplified, has to be healed, has to be interrogated. So this is not about saying, just for the sake of saying, I have no mother, I have no father, I have transcended mother, father, all these things, while carrying them in the head. If they are offloaded from the head, the objective mother and father pose no threat whatsoever, no matter how dysfunctional they may be. They pose no threat to me, Shivananda, Chidananda Rupa, Shiva Swarupa, who I am. It doesn't pose any affliction towards me at all. And therefore, this is a very important work for a mumukshu, a seeker of freedom, a jignasu, a seeker of knowledge. This internal healing has to happen before one can have that antahkarana shuddhi, emotional maturity, to take the knowledge as it comes. Otherwise, the knowledge will also be met with the same distrust with which I am greeting my primary relationships. There will be no shraddha, there will be no bhakti, there will be no receptivity. Therefore, this is very important. Then the last line before the chorus says, what does it say? Gurur naiva shishyaha. So Guru, Shishya, this is, we honor this relationship, and we say that it is lifelong, and we say that it is the most sacred relationship. But here, even that is transcended. So what is this Guru-Shishya relationship? It is the last frontier of duality. When a person declares herself or himself to be a Shishya, they are saying, I'm dropping all other roles. I'm just here. I have just one role. That is to be Shikshana Yogyaha Shishyaha. To be teachable. That's the only role. I'm just going to make myself teachable and perhaps stay at the Gurukulam, or nowadays there is Zoom Kulam. So, either Gurukulam or what else? Zoom Kulam or whatever else it is. And so I make myself teachable. And for that, what one has to do, usually when there is a mantra diksha given by the Guru, the person receiving this mantra, the diksha, usually 3 offerings are given. Some flowers, fruits, whatever, 3 in number. And the 3 stands for the 3 things that are going to be important from now on in the person's life. So one is, of course, Bhagavan, and then Guru, who shows me the nature of Bhagavan, and then the Shastra. These 3 things. But really, the 3 things then become 2 things. Guru is seen as Bhagavan, Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnuhu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha. So now there are only 2 things. Guru Bhagavan is one, and then there is Shastra. But Brahmavit Brahmaiva Bhavati means the knower of Brahman is Brahman, and so therefore the Shastra and the Guru also there is no difference. So now that difference is also swallowed up. That was just for the beginning. And then so now Guru embodies Shastra and Bhagavan. And then now there is the Shishya learning from the Guru and saying, I'm open, I don't know, please teach me. Adhihi Bhagavo Brahma. Adhihi Bhagavo Brahma means, revered teacher, please teach me Brahman. But here, Adi Shankara, Shankaracharya says that this Adhihi, teach me, means really Madartham Smara. Madartham Smara. Please remember how it was for you when you went to your teacher and you asked the same questions. How did your teacher teach you? Please teach me. So therefore you can see that it's a very sacred relationship and an important relationship. And we also see that in the Upanishads, after the instruction is given, what does the Shishya do? Gets up and goes. Gets up and goes. Does not linger there. Shvetaketu needed only 9 satsangs to understand Tattvamasi. Till then he kept on saying, Bhuya eva bhagavan vijñāpayatu. Please teach me this, oh revered sir, again. And after the 9th one, he is like, okay, finished. Arjuna needed 700 plus verses to gain this knowledge, but he too said, Nashto mohaha smritir labdha karishye vachanam tava. I have regained my senses. My delusion is destroyed. Okay, let's get on with this battle. I'll do whatever you are telling me to. No more resistance, no more fears. It is done. And so this is the Guru-Shishya relationship in the sense that it's an interim duality. It's a manufactured and deliberate duality, and it's an interim duality. And it is unlike any other relationship because even though the student may have a transference on the teacher, and it often happens, in the teacher the student sees mother, father and whoever else, and so there can be a transference upon the teacher, but the teacher does not participate in the transference, so there is no counter transference. Transference means a projection. That's what it means. You project some other relationship on the teacher, and sometimes two people in one body approach the teacher. What is one? The child. Take me, love me up, be my mommy, be my daddy. This is the child. The needy child goes to the teacher, and then the adult also goes to the teacher at the same time. And then we have to really see how skilled the teachers in the lineage have been to show the little rattle or the toy to the needy child and give the book to the adult, teach the Upanishad to the adult. We see this even in the 8th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad. Indra and Virochana. Indra, the king of the Devas, and Virochana, the king of the non-Devas. Who are non-Devas? Polite way of saying demons, Asuras. And the king of the Asuras both go to Prajapati for this knowledge because they have attended one satsang by Prajapati, where Prajapati declared, Atma apahata papma vijaraha vimrityuhu, etc. Atma doesn't have papa, no papa at all. We already saw that. Na papam na punyam, we saw that. Atma does not have any guilt, any hurt, any papa, no omissions, no commissions. No karma phala, no result of action. This was declared. The Devas got very excited because they were very sattvic and they wanted to understand this above anything else. The desire for the knowledge sprung up. The Asuras were excited because they wanted to continue their life of carnage, killing, violence and not accrue any papa. They said, wonderful. I am akarta. I'm not having any papa at all. This is great. I want to know this. They both go, but they've never been to an ashram before and they don't know what to do. And then they stay there for 33.5 years until Prajapati gets tired of them and says, gentlemen, why are you here? Usually Shishya should go to the Guru. But here Prajapati breaks his silence after 33 years and says, what are you doing here? What do you want? Why are you here? Oh, 33 years ago you said Atma apahata papma, Indra says. I want to know the Atma, I want to see the Atma. Prajapati, seeing Virochana, does not feel like teaching at all. So he has an ingenious solution. He asks them to bring a shallow, big plate of water. And he says, gentlemen, look at the Atma. This is not the final teaching. This is a preliminary teaching. But then both of them look at it. They twirl their mustaches. They just go like this, the biceps, triceps, etc. Both of them think, I wish this ashram has no lotion. I wish I had put some oil and so that it would have shown very nicely. Here I am. Not bad at all. Look how wonderful I look here. And then they both leave the ashram, thinking that Atma is as good as the body. Seeing them go, Prajapati laments. He says, look at them go without gaining this knowledge. And whosoever thinks this is the knowledge of the Atma and starts to teach this, body is as good as the Atma, then what? Then that lineage will be destroyed, will not have a chance to flourish. What flourish? It will perish. This is what Prajapati says because he didn't want the wrong knowledge to be disseminated. But Indra, being more mature, comes back because he thinks about it. He says, well, my reflection is Atma, but the reflection can be disturbed by wind, can be disturbed by ripples in the water. I think I've been had. I think I need to go back. He goes back alone, and then only the teaching begins. Virochana does not say one word in the whole encounter, because the Upanishad does not want the Asura to speak. Either in the Bhagavad Gita also there is no Duryodhana Uvacha. And then there is also again no Virochana Uvacha. Virochana said, these words we will never encounter because Upanishad does not give air time to Asuras. Direct speech is not accorded. But that is a primary reason he is silent. Another reason he is silent is because he is, in some ways, the shadow. We can look at it as a shadow self of Indra. And when he departs, then only the teaching begins. And so therefore, there may be a projection, coming back to the whole Guru-Shishya relationship, one may have a projection towards the teacher. In place of the teacher, one may have what is called Shobhana Adhyasa. Shobhana Adhyasa means a kind of a positive projection. Oh, the teacher is the best, east or west. Until which time? Until the teacher gives me whatever I want. The minute the teacher stops giving me what I want, then Ashobhana Adhyasa sets in. What is Ashobhana Adhyasa? A negative projection or a transference where one says, down with the teacher. You are fired. You are not making me feel good. You are not giving me what I want. So these are the projections. But the projections do not really affect the dissemination of the knowledge because it's a one-sided relationship, and it has to be. It's a one-sided relationship because the teacher is not participating in the projection and the transference. The teacher is not participating. And this, this was made known to me in a very beautiful way. Once I went to see my Guru, and he was sitting with many people in a small hotel room, and they were receiving prasad. So I said, okay, I'll wait outside, let them all come out, and then I'll go greet him, because it was a small room. I greeted him from near the door, and Swamiji acknowledged my presence, and there was another elderly gentleman there, about Swamiji's age, and then we fell into a conversation. He told me that he was Swamiji's kindergarten classmate. And so I was delighted to hear this. And so I said, please tell me some stories. Was Swamiji a very good boy? He said, no, he was a very naughty boy. And he was regaling me with all these stories. And then he said, you know, I have been listening to him all my life, and especially after he started to teach and everything. I have gone to many retreats and camps, and I have been listening to him so much. But this stupid attachment for my friend, Swamiji, my friend, does not go at all. The stupid attachment will not go. And then, to my surprise, Swamiji, who was hard of hearing, and Swamiji, who was in the room, way back in the room, responded. It's okay that he has this attachment, tell him. He's telling me. Because it is one-sided, it will resolve. So this was something which was it was a very learning moment for me, and that is why in the same spirit I'm sharing it with you. It was an eye-opening moment. And so in the same way, this Guru-Shishya relationship is an interim relationship where one sees, after gaining this knowledge, that the very Bhagavan that one was seeing in place of the Guru, one also sees in place of oneself. So if Guru is Bhagavan and the Guru is non-separate from everything else, the Guru is also non-separate from me. I am non-separate from that Bhagavan. That is the final stage of the teaching. But in terms of Vyavahara, it is said that one must still continue. You don't, after gaining the knowledge, you don't go and slap the teacher on the back and say, yo, Guru, what's up? You don't do that. Yes, you don't graduate from TTC and say, yo, you and I are one. This is a cognitive thing. Yes. In terms of conduct, the reverence for the one who gives this most sacred knowledge is always maintained. And it takes nothing to show the reverence to the teacher, to somebody that one respects. So it is all as though difference. As though difference between mother, father, myself, as though difference between friend, as though difference between myself and Guru. So ultimately, the best way to take this verse is to see that it is simply a way of gaining what is called in the Shastra as Sarvatma Bhava. Sarvatma Bhava is oneness. And this Sarvatma Bhava is an important hallmark of this teaching, of this knowledge. So this Sarvatma Bhava says, why just one mother, father? Everybody I look upon as mother and father. Everybody I look upon as a friend, depending upon their age and all this, of course. So everybody is connected to me. Why only these people are connected to me? Each and every person is connected to me. This is exactly the teaching. So Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. Next verse, please. Please scroll. Aham nirvikalpo nirakara rupaha vibhutva cha sarvatra sarvendriyanam na cha sangatam naiva muktirnameyah न चासंगतं नैव मुक्तिर्नमेयः चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं. Summarizing this, Shankaracharya stops negating now and then talks about what this Atma, what is the nature of this I. We will see the translation today and then we'll go more in depth into the verse in the morning. Aham nirvikalpaha. So when we, especially when we are in a yoga teaching course and we hear the word nirvikalpa, we immediately think of samadhi. Yeah. Here slightly different meaning is given. Vikalpa rahitaha. Nirgataha vikalpaha yasmat iti nirvikalpaha. So from whom, vikalpa means divisions. From whom all divisions have departed. This is what is called nirvikalpa. So I am that one from who is divisionless, from whom all divisions have totally departed. And nirakara rupaha. What is my form? My form is no particular form. Why? Because I'm all the forms. I'm not separate from any form and I don't have a particular form. Vibhutvat. Vibhutvat means, first let's take this. Sarvatra sarvendriyanam. So, in all respects, with regard to all the sense organs, I am one with everything. Why? Vibhutvat. Vibhuhu means vividham bhavati iti vibhuhu. Vividham bhavati means that which manifests as many, many things. So because I am all pervasive and manifesting as everything in the universe, I am not separate from any one thing. Naja asangatam. Not asangatam, asangatam. Asamantat sangatam. Naja asangatam. Asangatam means the cloying affection. Feeling that I can't do without this person. That kind of an attachment and involvement is not there for me. Naiva muktihi. So if that attachment is not there, then what is the need for detachment if I am not attached? So there is no reason to pursue freedom. Na meyaha. Meyaha means gyeyaha. Nothing to know further. Nothing to pursue further. Nothing to know further. And this is my Swarupa, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. More we'll see later. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadagya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.